Hello, family. This is Deborah with Black Education TV. I know many of you are familiar with the scripture that talks about bringing into captivity every thought into obedience of Yahushua HaMashiach. If you're not familiar with that scripture, it's a good one to learn and understand. But when it says bringing into captivity every thought into obedience, is letting you know that there is a strong possibility that your very thoughts are in disobedience. So, when you bring something into captivity, you take control of it. Or should I say, it's no longer free to do as it pleases. When something is captive, it's no longer free to move about freely, you see. And so, when the scripture tells us to bring into captivity every thought into obedience, it's letting us know that there is probably thoughts within us that are disobedient to Yahushua HaMashiach, to truth. And so we are commissioned to bring our thoughts into captivity because we have runaway thoughts. Anybody who's ever lived any length of time on this earth has runaway thoughts that should not be there. This is why the word says expressly that his thoughts, meaning the Most High's thoughts, are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways. He don't think like we do. We don't think like he does. He don't function as we do. You see, our thoughts will take us to a place of error. But this is why Dawid said that he's a man after Yah's own heart. When you think about the heart from a scriptural standpoint, it's referring to the mind. It's not just something beating in your chest. That's why the scripture says, as a man thinketh in his heart. You think with your mind, right? That's what we've been taught. But in this case, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. It's letting you know that what's in your heart are actually your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your actions. That's why the scripture also says that out of the heart springs forth the issues of life, meaning out of the mind. What enters into your mind and comes out through your mouth or through your actions are thoughts that were either brought into obedience or thoughts that are in disobedience. Are your thoughts in conjunction with what the Most High would do in a certain situation? There are situations that we are faced with daily. And we have a choice. Am I going to let this thought be a runaway thought? Or am I going to bring it into captivity? See, your mind might direct you to do one thing. Your heart, should I say, same thing, may direct you to do one thing, but the Ruach HaKodesh may direct you to do something totally different. This is why our thoughts have to be in alignment with his thoughts. And our ways have to be in alignment with his ways. He's not going to align himself to us, you see. That's why when you hear a songwriter say, wherever I go, let your spirit follow me, that makes no sense if you're trying to bring your thoughts into captivity. Because wherever the Spirit leads, we are to follow. He's not going to follow us. We are to follow the Ruach, or the Spirit. And so this is why we see so much chaos within families, within communities, within the world at large, because most people have not surrendered their thoughts to holiness and righteousness. But they have established their own righteousness. They do what is good within their own sight. You may have things good or right in one particular area, but what about other areas? We all fall guilty of these things. You can't pat yourself on the back in one area, but you're making many errors over here. It's unfortunate that many of us won't get this message. We allow ourselves to have runaway thoughts. Whenever a thought enters in, how you act on it determines how it's affected your life. Just think about a person who wants to commit suicide. Now, just because a thought enters in does not mean you have to entertain that thought. There are people who have felt in such a way to where they've wanted to end their own life. But they quickly dismissed the thought or brought that thought into captivity, into obedience of Yahushua HaMashiach. And so when you bring that thought into captivity, it's no longer holding you captive. When you allow your thoughts to hold you captive, you give in to something that is not of the Most High Yah. When you allow yourself to give in to hatred, it takes over. But what happens if you bring that thought into captivity? When you give in to pride, what happens if you bring that thought into captivity? A person can come to you and say, well, I think this is a better way of doing A, B, C. And you can say, okay, let's explore that way. Well, let's flip that around for a moment. What if you have an issue of pride and you present something and someone doesn't agree with you? Where does your mind take you? If this person doesn't agree with what you're saying, for whatever reason, does this cause bitterness in your heart? Or do you bring that thought into captivity and say, okay, no problem? See, that goes both ways. Can you accept someone else's idea without a problem? Or can you accept the fact that someone doesn't agree with your idea without a problem? There are so many different ways to look at things if you are willing to bring your thoughts into captivity instead of giving in to the will of the flesh. The will of the flesh says that my thoughts are going to play out the way I want them to. But when you're following after the Ruach HaKodesh, you're going to say, okay, since the scripture says that his thoughts are not my thoughts and my ways are not his ways, what would the Most High have me to do in this situation? Not what I want to do, but what would the Most High have me to do in this situation? I don't care how big or small the situation is. Let me think of another scenario that would make sense or bring things into perspective for you. If you see someone in today's very intensely charged environment, if someone takes cuts in front of you in the supermarket, do you pause, step back and analyze the situation, analyze the person? Did they see me? Or is this person already in a hostile state? Is this person trying to start something? How do you deal with that situation? Now, the pride of a man or woman would say, I'm going to get them told. I'm going to get with them. I'm going to make a scene. I'm going to cut up in this place, right? The pride of a person will cause them to do that. But wisdom will say, okay, right now, the environment in this world, in this country, is just a little bit too charged. The atmosphere is a little bit too charged for me to allow something this small, simple, and minute to get me into a situation that I don't want to be in. Of course, you have those who will look at you and say, oh, you're just a wimp. Oh, you're just this, that, and the other. But you'll walk out of there alive. You'll walk out of there free. Because the enemy is trying to pull people into conflicts. He's trying to pull people into situations that are going to get them in trouble, get them killed, or get them in these fierce, nonsensical battles that will amount to nothing. And so you have to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove and understand what is going on. And learn how to bring every thought into obedience. Bring it into captivity. Enslave your own thoughts. And say, look, what you're trying to get me to do is not good for me. It's not good for my family. It's not good for this person or that person. What you're trying to get me to do is wrong. Now, this is you talking to your own mind, your own heart, you see. bringing into captivity every thought into obedience. The world is already filled with people who are going about establishing their own righteousness. It don't matter who you are, what color you are, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're a child, an elderly person, a professional, a layman, it doesn't matter. The world is filled with people doing what they feel is right in their own eyes. Because folk refuse to bring into captivity their own thoughts into obedience of Yahushua HaMashiach. Again, there are so many situations that we can be presented with, and we have a choice to make. How am I going to allow this thought or this action out of the heart springs forth the issues of life? How am I going to allow this thought or this thing to affect my life? Am I going to be consumed by a thought in such a way to where it causes me to do some irreparable damage to my soul, to the hearts and minds of others? Something that you will be judged for ultimately by the Most High. Because we got to understand, we got to know that our thoughts, our actions, don't just affect us. They affect others around us. And there are consequences for that. Now, I'm not talking about someone who don't like how you do things and they feel negatively affected by it. For instance, you'll have kids who feel like their parents are wrong for not allowing them to watch cable TV all day. I'm not talking about that. I mean, you have had children or teenagers who didn't bring their thoughts into captivity, and mom or dad took away the video game and they said, okay, I'm going to kill you for that. You see? So I'm not talking about a person who just don't like another person's decision and decide to act upon it. I'm talking about things that violate the word of Yah. Things that are not in obedience to Yah's word. For instance, there were things that were told of us or mandates that we have that we must follow that are scriptural mandates. Things according to the law. I was reading through some of the 613 laws yesterday and referencing the scriptures that go along with them. And it was a frightening thing to see that the majority of us are breaking laws minute by minute. And it's sad that many don't believe that, they don't understand it. But start to read through some of those scriptures. Start to read through the law. And you'll see just how far from the law you are. That's not to say that we don't keep the law. You do keep the law. But when you know and realize the number of those laws that you break without even knowing, it is frightening. I mean, there's a law that says something about not eating a piece of fruit from a tree that is not a certain age. Now, who would know that? Who would know that? Unless you studied the law profusely. I mean, there are so many laws that we break constantly through Scripture, that are in Scripture, and we don't even know. So this is why we have to depend on Yah's mercy, His guidance, His direction, His love to make it through, His forgiveness. This is why we must bring into captivity every thought, because He said that He would write His laws in us. He would write His laws in our hearts, which would be in our minds. He said He's going to do that. And so for that reason alone, we have got to yield our members as instruments of righteousness. We have to yield to this process too. Although He may write His laws in our hearts, we still have to yield our members. Because whom you yield your members to, that's whose servant you are. That's scriptural, y'all. Whoever you yield to, that's whose servant you are. So if you yield your members as instruments of unrighteousness, if you are yielding to your own thoughts, which are in many cases satanic in nature, demonic in nature, then you are a servant of the satanic world. If you are constantly yielding your members to do unrighteous works. If you yield your members as instruments of righteousness, you are a servant of Yah. But it is a daily fight. It's a daily process. It's not something to be taken lightly, like so many do. So many take these things lightly because they have established their own righteousness. So the word of the day, family, is to bring your thoughts into captivity, into obedience of the will of the Most High. And with that, I will say shalom.